Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Ramanjeet Kaur Johal from the Department of Public Administration, Punjab University, Chandigarh. Today we are going to discuss privatization of public sector enterprises and their disinvestment following public enterprise reforms announced in 1991. We will be talking about the policy for disinvestment and privatization in light of the new industrial policy of 1991, thus clarifying the concepts of what is disinvestment and what is privatization, what are the different approaches to disinvestment and privatization, and what has been the history of these in India since 1991 to the current times is what we are going to discuss in detail, finally ending with the problems that have been faced in carrying out disinvestment and privatization. After studying this module, you will be able to understand chronologically the implementation of public enterprise reforms, explain the concept, rationale and objectives of disinvestment and privatization, analyze the policy of public sector and disinvestment in the post-reform period, and identify the issues of disinvestment and privatization of public enterprises. The history of public enterprises in India can be broadly categorized in three phases. These phases reflect the ideology of the political leadership at the time and the economic compulsions of the state. Each phase can be roughly characterized as lasting 15 to 20 years. In the 1950s, seeds were laid to build modern India with a strong industrial base. There was a need for the creation of a strong indigenous capital goods sector, which could not, however, be undertaken by the then India's fledgling private sector. It was in response to this that the state stepped in with a vision of a mixed economy approach, in which both the public sector and the private sector had roles to play. In the next phase, public sector enterprises were seen as an instrumentality of the state. The state nationalized private sector companies, following a strong import substituting industrial development policy aiming at self-reliance and the policy of licensing for industries. Monopolies got created both in the public and the private sectors. High tariffs were also imposed on imports to help the domestic industry grow. Since profit was not a key lever of performance for CPSEs and attention was paid more to adherence to rules, there was an inbuilt bias against risk-taking. By the early 1980s, it had become clear that the government could not support the CPSEs at their prevailing level of economic performance. The reforms of 1991, inter alia, aimed at improving efficiencies in the public sector enterprises and reducing the fiscal deficit. The need for public enterprise reforms. Over years, there has been a declining trend in the performance of the public sector. Public sector enterprises have failed to achieve the desired objectives. Just repeat this. Need for public enterprise reforms. Over the years, there has been a declining trend in the performance of the public sector. PSEs have failed to achieve the desired objectives. Thus, the need of the hour being that there must be attempts towards reforming their way of functioning. Prerequisites for the success of reforms. The Indian experience has revealed a number of prerequisites such as political will, bureaucratic attitude, organizational competence, administrative feasibility, proper timing, well-conceived ideal, proper implementation, and national culture. Public enterprise reforms since 1991. Good governance in public enterprises is inextricably linked with their survival under increasingly competitive and complex conditions. In the wake of liberalization, Government of India announced the new industrial policy of 91, which included 5 major public enterprise reforms. First, dereservation. Under this, the portfolio of public sector investments will be reviewed with a view to focus the public sector on strategic, high-tech and essential infrastructure. There would be no bar for reserved areas to be open to the private sector selectively. Second, disinvestment. To raise resources and encourage wider public participation, a part of the government's shareholding in the public sector would be offered to mutual funds, financial institutions, general public, and workers. Thirdly, there will be a greater thrust on performance improvement through the Memoranda of Understanding system. Fourthly, public sector enterprises which are chronically sick will be referred to the Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, BIFR. A social security mechanism will be created to protect the interests of workers likely to be affected by such rehabilitation packages. Finally, the boards of public sector companies would be made more professional and given greater powers. The new industrial policy of 1991's reforms initiatives were followed by several other initiatives, including deepening the 5 already mentioned. Under the reservation, the Industrial Policy Resolution of 56 had reserved as many as 17 sectors of industry exclusively for the public sector. The new industrial policy reduced this list of 17 to 8 and allowed selective competition in the reserved areas. Now, this number has been reduced to 2 alone: atomic energy and railways. Regarding revival or rehabilitation of sick enterprises, the problem of sickness in CPSEs is addressed by the administrative ministries or departments in the government by evolving appropriate need-based strategy. Some of the strategies for restructuring of CPSEs include revival through the process of financial restructuring, formation of joint ventures by induction of partners capable of providing technical, financial and marketing inputs, and organizational restructuring through voluntary retirement scheme. Under the present arrangement, the BIFR, that is the Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, decides the viability and sanctions rehabilitation schemes for sick industrial public sector enterprises under the provision of SICA, that is the Sick Industrial Companies Act. This act was repealed in 1991. The Government of India set up a board for reconstruction of public sector enterprises in 2004, known as the BRPSE, to advise the government on the measures to be taken to restructure PSEs, including cases where disinvestments or closure or sale are justified. In addition, BRPSE gave recommendations on making PSEs autonomous and professional, considering their restructuring, advise government on their disinvestments, closure, sale, etc., and to monitor incipient sickness in PSEs. It also streamlined the multiple mechanisms for revival of sick CPSEs. The BRPSE set up in Department of Public Enterprises was wound up by 2015. The concerned administrative ministries are now responsible to monitor sickness of CPSEs functioning under them and take timely redressal measures with the approval of the competent authority. Regarding disinvestment of government equity in central PSEs began in 91-92. The Disinvestment Commission, in its report on corporate governance and autonomy, noted that a majority of investors attach considerable importance to the quality of corporate governance in a company and are willing to pay a premium for better managed companies. Till 2000, disinvestment was primarily through sale of minority shares in small lots. With a view to speed up the process, a new Ministry of Disinvestment was set up in 1999. This, in 2005, the government reiterated that existing Navratnas will be retained in the public sector and these would be encouraged to raise resources from the capital market. Regarding professionalizing the boards, the guidelines issued in 1992 made it clear that government has opted for mixed boards with not more than 50% of the directors being functional directors. The number of government directors on the boards should not exceed 1/6 of the actual strength of the board and should be limited to a maximum of 2 in number. At least 1/3 of the directors should be non-official part-time directors who are to be appointed from a panel of suitable directors. Regarding Memoranda of Understanding, the MOU system in India aims at achieving the following. 1. Real operational autonomy and management responsible for results. 2. A culture of accountability about the organization and not merely at the point of interface between the government and the management. And 3. Operating the public enterprises on business lines. The MOU system that was started with 4 CPSCs in 86-87 increased its coverage to 195 CPSCs in the year 2012-2013. 77% of the PSCs who have signed MOUs have improved their performance. Regarding the autonomy package through declaring Maharatna, Navratna and Mini Ratnas, the government in 1997 granted operational autonomy to very large public enterprises numbering 11 under Navratna program as a key initiative to empower these enterprises to become global giants. Autonomy was granted in respect of 6 major areas of their affairs: capital expenditure, organization restructuring, personnel policies, technical joint ventures, and borrowings. At a later stage, another 97 profit-earning public enterprises were classified as mini Ratnas to enable select enterprises to become big players in the domestic market. However, in their case, the degree of autonomy was lower as compared to Navratna status public enterprises. In 2005, the government reiterated that existing Navratnas will be retained in the public sector and these will be encouraged to raise resource from the capital market. The government has introduced Maharatna scheme in 2010 with the objective of delegation of enhanced powers to the boards of identified large-sized Navratna CPSCs so as to facilitate expansion of their operations, both in the domestic as well as global markets. Maharatna status was conferred to 5 CPSCs, namely Indian Oil Corporation, NTPC, ONGC, Steel Authority of India, Coal India. Presently, there are 16 Navratna and 68 Mini Ratnas. Relaxation of guidelines. In order to provide considerable flexibility and autonomy to public enterprises to be able to function in a liberalized economic environment and respond to market forces, on the recommendations of the Vittal Committee in 1997, the Government of India abolished as many as 696 guidelines out of 892 earlier issued. This step has definitely granted functional autonomy to public enterprises, liberating them from the stronghold of central bureaucracy. Dr. Arjun Sengupta Committee and a committee under T.K. Nair, Chairman, Public Enterprises Selection Board, were constituted by the Government of India to review the existing guidelines and to recommend cancellation, redrafting, or simplification of the guidelines. The National Investment Fund was set up in 2005 with the view to use 25% of the disinvested equity for the revival and capital investment requirements of PSCs. The remaining 75% would be utilized for social sector schemes like health, education, employment, etc. From 2009, disinvestment proceeds are being utilized for various social sector schemes like Manrega, Indira Awas Yojana, Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyutikaran Yojana, etc. The government also approved restructuring of the National Investment Fund and decided that the disinvestment proceeds with effect from the fiscal year 2013-14 will be credited to the existing public account under the head NIF, and they would remain there until withdrawn or invested for the approved purpose. Privatization. In the budget of 1998, it was for the first time that the term privatization was used instead of disinvestment. By strategic sale, privatization was envisaged, though confined to non-strategic areas. The classification was redefined by the government in 1999 to include only defense-related atomic energy undertakings and railway transport among strategic enterprises and treat all other undertakings as non-strategic. The government also stipulated that reduction of its stake going down to less than 51% or to 26% would not be automatic, but would be governed by consideration as to whether continued presence of the public sector in an enterprise was required to prevent concentration of power in private hands. A Department of Disinvestment was established in December 1999 to give an impetus to the program of disinvestment and privatization. The National Renewal Fund. This was established in February 1992 for protecting the interest of employees on account of privatization. The employees were offered voluntary retirement under this scheme. National Renewal Fund covered the expenses of VRS and provided for retraining to the workers in the organized sector. After the abolition of the National Renewal Fund in February 2000, the Scheme for Counseling, Retraining and Redeployment (CRR) of rationalized employees of CPSEs is being implemented by the Department of Public Enterprises since the year 2001. Disinvestment and privatization in India. Disinvestment refers to the action of an organization or the government in selling or liquidating an asset or subsidiary. In simple words, disinvestment is the withdrawal of capital from a country or corporation. Disinvestment involves sale of only part of equity holdings held by the government to private investors. The disinvestment process leads only to dilution of ownership and not transfer of full ownership, while privatization refers to the transfer of ownership from government to private investors. Disinvestment is thus called partial privatization. Disinvestment may or may not result in privatization. Privatization is the process of transferring ownership and management of a business, enterprise, agency, public service, or public property from the public sector to the private sector, either to a business that operates for a profit or to a non-profit organization. However, in case of the disinvestment, the transfer of equity is less than 51%. Thus, the management and the ownership remains in the hands of the government. The rationale behind disinvestment or privatization is that given an increasingly competitive environment on the back of private enterprises gaining ground on several parameters, disinvestment of PSUs assumed significance. Increased competition from private players was making it difficult for many PSUs to operate profitably. As the result of a rapid erosion of the value of the public assets, it became extremely important that the government disinvests central PSUs early in order to realize a high value. We would also discuss the objectives of disinvestment. PSUs had shown a very negative rate of return on capital employed. Inefficient PSUs had become and were continuing to be a drag on the government's resources. The national gross domestic product and gross national savings were also getting adversely affected by low returns from public sector undertakings. In relation to the capital employed, the levels of profits were too low. Of the various factors responsible for low profits in PSUs, the following were identified as particularly important: the price policy of public sector undertakings, underutilization of capacity in them, problems relating to planning and construction of projects, problems of labor, personnel and management, and lack of autonomy. Hence, the need for the government to get rid of these units and to concentrate on core activities was identified. The government also took a view that it should move out of non-core businesses, especially the ones where the private sector had now entered in a significant way. Finally, disinvestment was also seen by the government as a source to raise funds for meeting general and specific needs. Importance of disinvestment. The primary purpose of the government's disinvestment initiative is to utilize the funds that become available post-disinvestment for several purposes. Some important ones are financing the increasing fiscal deficit, financing large-scale infrastructure development, encouraging spending, retiring government debt, since almost 40 to 45% of the central government's revenue goes towards repaying public debt or interest payments, spending on social programs such as health and education. The policy of public sector disinvestment is important to understand. Disinvestment of a percentage of shares owned by the government in public enterprises emerged as a policy option in the wake of economic liberalization, globalization, and structural reforms launched in 1991. While on one hand, disinvestment as a policy has been much debated, there have also been changes and disagreements in terms of different approaches to disinvestment. Initially, it was not conceived of as privatization of existing public enterprises, but as limited sales of equity with the objective of raising some resources. In the first decade, 1991 to 2000, the Government of India enunciated a policy to disinvest up to 20% of its equity in selected public sector undertakings to mutual funds and investment institutions in the public sector, as well as workers in these firms. The stated purpose of the policy was to place equity across a broad base, improve management, increase resources to the enterprises, and to raise funds for the general exchequer. In the year 91-92, with 31 selected PSUs disinvested for Rs 3,038 crore. Later in 92-93, to ensure better prices, individual shares were auctioned separately. The Committee on Disinvestment in Public Sector Enterprises, under the chairpersonship of Sri C. Rangarajan, recommended that the percentage of equity divested could be up to 49% for industries reserved for the public sector, and that in exceptional cases, up to 74% of the equity could be divested. In 96, the Disinvestment Commission, chaired by Sri G.V. Ramakrishna, was set up to advise, supervise, monitor, and publicize gradual disinvestment of Indian PSUs. It submitted 12 reports covering recommendations on privatization of 58 PSUs. In a break from a past policy of share public offerings, the Commission recommended strategic sales with transfer of management. By 96-97, sales were open to NRIs and foreigners and through global depository receipts in the international markets. Apart from arms, ammunition, and related defense industries, atomic energy and mining of minerals for the atomic industry and railway transport, all other industries were classified as non-strategic, for which government stakes could be dropped to as low as 26% on a case-by-case basis. The Disinvestment Commission ceased to exist in May 2004, and the Department of Disinvestment became one of the departments under the Ministry of Finance. The government was able to meet its annual target of funds to be raised from disinvestment in only 3 out of 10 years of this decade. In 93-94, the proceeds from PSU disinvestment were nil over a target amount of Rs 3,500 crore. The reasons for such low proceeds from disinvestment against the actual target set were perceived to be unfavorable market conditions, offers made by the government not being attractive for private sector investors, a lot of opposition on the valuation process, no clear-cut policy on disinvestment, strong opposition from employee and trade unions, lack of transparency in the process, and lack of political will. The value realized through the sale of shares, even in blue-chip companies like IOC, BPCL, HPCL, GAIL, and VSNL, however, was low, since the control still lay with the government. Most of these offers of minority stakes during this period were picked up by the domestic financial institutions. Unit Trust of India was one such major institution. The period from 2001 to 2003 was when the maximum number of disinvestments took place. These took the shape of either strategic sales, that is, involving an effective transfer of control and management to a private entity, or an offer of sale to the public, with the government still retaining control of the management. Strategic sale included Balco, Hindustan Zinc Limited, Hotel Corporation of India Limited, IPCL, Maruti Suzuki India Limited, and others. The valuations realized by the strategic sales route were found to be substantially higher than those from minority stake sales. During this period, against an aggregate target of rupees 38,500 crore to be raised from PSU disinvestment, the government managed to raise rupees 21,163.68 crore. From 2004-05 to 2008-09, the issue of PSU disinvestment remained a contentious issue. The National Common Minimum Program of the UPA coalition government confirmed the commitment of the UPA government to a strong and effective public sector. Firstly, all privatizations will be considered on a transparent and consultative case-by-case basis. 2. Generally profit-making companies will not be privatized. 3. The government will retain existing Navratna companies in the public sector while these companies can raise resources from the capital market. 4. While every effort will be made to modernize and restructure Sikh public sector companies and revive Sikh industry, chronically loss-making companies will either be sold off or closed after all workers have got their legitimate dues and compensation. And finally, the government believes that privatization should increase competition and not decrease it. The government approved the constitution of a National Investment Fund from April 1, 2005, comprising of proceeds from disinvestment of public sector undertakings. On May 26, 2005, the Finance Minister announced the intention to disinvest 10% of government-owned equity in the Navratna company BHEL. But after protests from the left parties, his move was dropped. The Finance Minister also ruled out the strategic sale route of disinvestment while keeping open the offer of sale route in 13 profit-making PSEs identified by the earlier NDA government. In June 2006, another attempt was made, this time for the sale of 10% stake each in two non-Navratna profit-making companies, NALCO and NLC. However, following indefinite strike by NLC, that is Neyveli Lignite Corporation workers, the move was shelved. On July 6, 2006, the Prime Minister decided to keep all disinvestment decisions and proposals on hold pending further review. In 2009 and to 10, a stable government and improved stock market conditions initially led to a renewed thrust on disinvestments. The government started the process by selling minority stakes in listed and unlisted profit-making PSUs. This period saw disinvestments in companies such as NHPC Limited, Oil India Limited, NTPC, REC, etc. through public offers. The Economic Survey of 2008-09 stated the government's plan of action to revitalize the disinvestment program and plan to generate at least 25,000 crore per year, complete the process of selling of 5 to 10% equity in previously identified profit-making non-Navratnas, list all unlisted public sector enterprises and sell a minimum of 10% of equity to the public, auction all loss-making PSUs that cannot be revived. For those in which net worth is below zero, allow negative bidding in the form of debt write-off. Just repeat this. I said below zero. Okay. For those in which net worth is zero, allow negative bidding in the form of debt write-off. However, in the 2011 to 14 period, the disinvestment process slowed down and the targets could not be met due to interministerial disputes, lukewarm response from investors, and external and internal market conditions. Even though the moratorium that the UPA government had placed on strategic sales in 2009 had been lifted, the new disinvestment policy that PM Modi's cabinet approved in February is bound to increase government control over public enterprises. The intent of the new policy is not to shrink the public sector, but to rejig it so that assets of public sector companies, including land and cash balances, can be hived off and used for investment in new projects. The Department of Disinvestment has been renamed as the Department of Investment and Public Asset Management from 14th April 2016, with focus of the government on management of its investment in central public sector enterprises for accelerating economic development as well as augmenting government resources for higher expenditure. The new disinvestment mantra is to minimize interference, to allow public sector undertakings to function along commercial principles, and to grant managerial autonomy in decision making, such as in appointments. In a course correction, the new disinvestment policy provides for land to be valued at market price for inclusion in sales. Niti Aayog has been entrusted to come up with fresh recommendations about loss-making units that can be sold, their assets valued and disposed of, and to carry out possible strategic sales. That the task of identifying PSUs for strategic sales and of reframing of the policy objective itself got farmed out to Niti Aayog under the new disinvestment policy. Financial parameters of public sector companies such as borrowings and operating profits are being closely monitored to identify possibilities of share buybacks, a new kind of disinvestment the government has recently come up with. Historically, majority disinvestments have been typically made to strategic partners. These partners could be other CPSEs themselves, a few examples being BRPL to Indian Oil Corporation, MRL to IOC, and KRL to BPCL. Alternatively, these can be private entities, like the sale of Modern Foods to Hindustan Lever, Balco to Sterlite, and CMC to TCS. Complete privatization is a form of majority disinvestment wherein 100% control of the company is passed on to a buyer. Examples of this include 18 hotel properties of ITDC and 3 hotel properties of HCI. A number of problems and issues have bedeviled the disinvestment process. Major issues of disinvestment and privatization can be discussed under the following 10 points. 1. Lack of political commitment. Given the lack of a clear political majority to govern, the various governments since 91 have had to play a balancing game in satisfying various political constituencies about whether to privatize. Between 96 and 99, India had 4 prime ministers. The prime minister, the finance and disinvestment ministers may have had a keen interest in seeing privatization succeed, but the other coalition members, mainly left parties, had opposing views. Second, bureaucratization of the disinvestment process. Decisions on privatization are taken by a large group of bureaucrats who are not at the cutting edge of economic thought or business practice. Problems of collective action remain. Also, there are so many involved in the process that there are tendencies to free ride. No civil servant has a tenure long enough to be held accountable for a decision. Third, the complex institutional framework. There are a number of agencies involved: the Department of Disinvestment, the Core Group of Secretaries on Disinvestment, the Cabinet Committee on Disinvestment, the Bureau of Public Enterprises within the Ministry of Heavy Industry and Public Enterprises, and there are the boards for industrial and financial reconstruction, the Appellate Authority for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, and a board for reconstruction of public enterprises. The National Renewal Fund has been set up to protect the interest of employees, but the trade unions do not favor privatization, even though the experience of VRS has been in favor of the leaving employees, and wages increased by an average of Rs 1,600 per employee in Modern Food Industries Limited. In fact, Hindustan Levers took measures to financially restructure the company and bring it out of BIFR's purview at their own expense. Fifth, improper valuation of PSEs. According to the critics of privatization, because of lack of transparency in the evaluation and privatization procedure and rampant corruption, the government might sell the PSCs at throwaway prices. Complete privatization may result in public monopolies becoming private monopolies. It needs to be ensured that privatization leads to greater competition in all cases. Another argument is that profit-making PSCs with sound track record should not be privatized as they are performing well in any which way. A good example against this criticism would be Balco, which was a profit-making company that earned the government an average dividend over 8 years of Rs 5.69 crore every year on the equity sold. The government post-disinvestment, however, started getting Rs 82.65 crore every year. Another point is that loss-making units do not attract investment easily. More than 25% of the central PSCs have a negative worth, and many of these are out of the turnaround zone. The revival and rehabilitation by BIFR route has proved a failure in many cases. Procrastination at the government level is enormous and largely unavoidable because of government procedures and involvement of a number of agencies in the process. There is uncertainty and delays in privatization. The progress on the government front has been tardy. The Department of Disinvestment needs a clear roadmap with prospective planning. Earlier, the much simpler privatization of Modern Foods and Lagan Jute Machinery Company also took more than 2 years, respectively. The strategic sale should ideally not take more than 6 to 9 months. So, students, let us conclude this detailed discussion that we have had on public enterprise reform since 1991. We are now clear about what disinvestment and privatization means, and that disinvestment does not necessarily lead to privatization. In studying the history and the policy of disinvestment over the past years since 1991, we have seen that the political climate played a very important part in what actually happened. Therefore, in 1991, the process started, but at a slow pace. It was at its peak in the early 2000s, but then again, due to the political climate and considerations, it slowed down 2009 onwards, when the Congress had the left parties as its important coalition partner, and they were doubtful about this policy of disinvestment and privatization. In 2014, with the new government coming in, we find that again, the government is not in favor of privatization. However, it is in favor of bringing about efficiencies in the public sector and using the resources from the public sector to finance various developmental activities of the government.